The Cafe That Remembered Every Love Story. Chapter 1. The Cafe on Willow Street. There was a cafe in Bellwether, Massachusetts, that most people passed without noticing. It stood halfway down Willow Street, between a laundromat and a bookstore that had been selling used paperbacks since 1987. The cafe had a narrow green awning, 6 windows across the front, and a brass bell above the door that made a tired little sound whenever someone entered. Its name was the Juniper Café. Nothing about it looked extraordinary. There were no Instagram-worthy neon signs, no expensive marble counters, no baristas who wrote complicated messages in the foam of a latte. There were mismatched wooden tables, old photographs on the walls, a chalkboard menu, and a pastry case that always seemed slightly too full by closing time, and yet people in Bellwether talked about the Juniper as though it knew things. Not secrets exactly, something quieter. People said the cafe had a strange way of holding on to memories. A couple might sit at table 7 on their first date. 10 years later, they might return with their children. Someone might propose beside the window on a rainy Tuesday. Someone else might sit at the same table years later, alone, trying to understand why the person they once loved had stopped answering their calls. The staff never commented on these things. They simply remembered. At least that was what people said. 29-year-old Nora Bennett had never believed any of it. Nora had moved to Bellwether in October after her mother died. She hadn't planned to stay. The original idea had been simple. Sell her mother's house, pack the remaining boxes, drive somewhere warmer, maybe North Carolina, maybe Arizona, anywhere that didn't have 6 months of grey skies and winters that seemed determined to outlast everyone's patience. But then she found a job at the Juniper, and somehow 1 week became 3 months, 3 months became 6, and by the time summer arrived, Nora knew every regular customer by name. She knew that Mr. Alvarez wanted exactly 2 sugars, that Hannah from the flower shop drank chamomile tea but pretended she liked espresso, that the 2 retired teachers who came every Thursday had been married for 43 years and still argued about crossword puzzles. She knew which tables wobbled, which window leaked during heavy rain, which coffee machine made a strange clicking noise whenever it needed cleaning. She knew almost everything about the cafe, except one thing: why there was a handwritten card tucked behind the old wooden clock near the kitchen. She had discovered it on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The card was yellow with age. On the front, someone had written, "For the person who comes after me." Nora had turned it over. There was only 1 sentence on the back. If you're reading this, you probably think you came here by accident. She had laughed. Then she had put it back. That should have been the end of it. But the following Monday morning, Nora arrived before sunrise, and the card was gone. In its place was another, same handwriting, same yellow paper, only this time it said, "You should ask Daniel why table 7 matters." Nora stared at it for several seconds. Then she looked across the empty cafe. Table 7 sat beside the front window. Nothing about it looked unusual. 4 wooden legs, a scratched surface, a tiny burn mark near the edge. Nora picked up the card, and for the first time since moving to Bellwether, she wondered if the Juniper really did remember, or if someone was trying very hard to make her believe that it did.
Chapter 2. Daniel at Table 7. Daniel Reed arrived at 7:12 every morning. Nora knew because she'd noticed the pattern weeks ago. He never came at 7:10, never 7:15, always 7:12. He was 33, maybe 34, with dark blonde hair that was usually a little too long and the tired expression of someone who didn't sleep enough. He worked at the Bellwether Public Library. At least, that was what Nora knew. He ordered black coffee, sometimes toast, never pastries, and he always sat at table 7. That morning, Nora was waiting for him. When the bell above the door rang at 7:12, she looked up. Daniel stopped. "You look like you're about to tell me something terrible," he said. Nora raised an eyebrow. "Good morning to you too." "Sorry." He took off his jacket. Nora placed his coffee on the counter. Daniel. Yes. Why do you always sit at table 7? He stared at her. Not dramatically. Not suspiciously. Just long enough that Nora immediately regretted asking. Then he glanced toward the window. Because it's a table. That's your answer. That's the answer. Very convincing. Daniel picked up his coffee. Thanks. He walked toward table 7. Nora watched him sit. She waited 30 seconds. Then she walked over. Someone left a note. Daniel looked up. What kind of note? Nora handed it to him. His expression changed. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. That was enough. Okay, Nora said. So you know something. Daniel folded the card carefully. Where did you find this? Behind the clock. When? Yesterday. And you left it there? Yes. Then someone moved it. Clearly. Daniel looked toward the kitchen. Nora crossed her arms. Daniel. He sighed. You shouldn't get involved. That irritated her more than it should have. Why? Because it's nothing. You recognized the handwriting. No. You did. Daniel looked down at his coffee. Nora waited. Finally, he said, My sister used to write like that. The cafe suddenly seemed quieter. Used to. She died. Nora's expression softened. I'm sorry. Thanks. When? 8 years ago. Nora sat across from him. She didn't ask how. Something in his face told her not to. Instead, she pointed at the card. Did your sister write these? I don't know. That's not a no. No, it isn't. Daniel ran his thumb along the edge of the paper. My sister, Emily, used to come here. To the Juniper. Every day. How long? Almost 4 years. Nora looked toward the walls. There were photographs everywhere. Old couples. Families. Birthday cakes. Graduation celebrations. A woman holding a newborn. A man proposing to someone near the front window. She had never paid attention to the older photographs. Now she did. Was she dating someone? Nora asked. Daniel smiled faintly. Emily was always dating someone. Anyone serious? One. Who? Daniel looked toward the window. His name was Michael. Nora waited. Daniel's voice became quieter. They were supposed to get married. Supposed to. Emily died 3 weeks before the wedding. Nora didn't know what to say. Daniel took a sip of coffee. After a moment, he added, Michael disappeared. Disappeared. Left town. Why? I don't know. You never asked. I was 25. Nora nodded. 25 suddenly seemed very young. Daniel folded the card again. Whatever you're thinking, don't. That's a little late. He almost smiled. Then his eyes landed on something behind Nora. Nora turned. An old photograph hung on the wall. She'd seen it before, but she'd never noticed the young woman standing near the corner. Dark hair. Bright smile. A denim jacket. Emily. And beside her stood a man Nora had never seen before. Michael. There was something written beneath the photograph. A date. And 4 words. Some stories don't end. Nora looked at Daniel. Who wrote that? He didn't answer, because the bell above the cafe door rang, and someone walked in. An older woman Nora had never seen before. She looked directly at Daniel, then at the photograph, and finally at Nora. You're Sarah's daughter, she said. Nora froze. My mother's name was Sarah. The woman nodded. I know. Chapter 3. The Woman Who Knew Sarah. The woman's name was Evelyn Hart. She was 72, perhaps 73, and dressed in a navy cardigan despite the warm morning. She chose table 3. Nora brought her coffee. "How did you know my mother?" Nora asked. Evelyn smiled. "Your mother came here often." Nora frowned. "She never mentioned the juniper." "Your mother didn't mention many things." There was something strange about hearing that from a stranger. Nora sat across from her. Daniel remained at table 7, watching but pretending not to. "How long did she come here?" Evelyn stirred her coffee. "Years. Before I moved to Bellwether. Long before." Nora stared at her. Her mother had lived in Bellwether for 20 years. But after Nora's father died, she'd moved away for several years. She'd returned alone. Nora had always assumed her mother had spent those years quietly, working, gardening, reading, recovering. Apparently not. What did she do here? Evelyn smiled. She listened. To what? People. That answer felt deliberately vague. Nora leaned back. My mother wasn't exactly the type to spend her afternoons listening to strangers. Oh, she was. Evelyn looked toward the photograph of Emily. Your mother was very good at listening. Daniel finally spoke. She was. Nora looked at him. You knew my mother too? Not well. Apparently better than I did. Daniel's face tightened. Nora. She stood. I'm going to get some air. Outside, the morning was cool and bright. Bellwether was waking up. Delivery trucks moved down Main Street. Someone was unlocking the bookstore. A dog barked somewhere behind the apartments. Normal things. Nora liked normal things. Normal things didn't leave handwritten cards behind clocks. They didn't know dead women's names. And they certainly didn't make her wonder what her mother had been doing in this cafe before Nora came back to town. The front door opened. Daniel stepped outside. Nora didn't look at him. You should go back inside. Probably. She folded her arms. Did my mother know Emily? Yes. How? Through the cafe. That's not an answer. Daniel leaned against the brick wall. Your mother helped Emily after her mother died. Nora's expression changed. Emily's mother died? Yeah. When? About 9 years ago. Before Emily? Yes. Nora looked toward the cafe. So my mother knew Emily? Yes. And Michael? Daniel hesitated. Yes. Did she know what happened between them? I think so. Nora looked at him. What happened? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. You've known my mother for years. I knew her here. That isn't the same thing. Nora stared at him. She hated how reasonable that sounded. Then Daniel said something that made her forget everything else. Your mother left something here. Nora turned. What? Daniel looked at her. She asked the owner to keep it. What is it? I don't know. Daniel, I've never seen it. Then how do you know it exists? Because my sister told me. When? Before she died. Nora's heart beat faster. What did she say? Daniel looked toward the cafe door. She said, if Sarah ever asks for it, give it to her. Nora swallowed. My mother never asked. No. Why? Daniel looked at her. Maybe she was waiting. For what? He didn't answer. The bell above the door rang again. Evelyn appeared. She stood in the doorway, holding something. A small wooden box. Nora immediately knew it belonged to her. Not because she'd seen it before. Because she recognized the handwriting on the lid. Her mother's. For Nora, When she's ready. Nora stared at it. Evelyn held it out. Your mother told me not to give you this until you came back. Nora couldn't move. She knew I'd come back. Evelyn smiled sadly. Your mother knew you better than you think. Chapter 4. The Box. Nora didn't open the box at the cafe. She took it home. She placed it on the kitchen table. Then she made coffee. Then she washed a mug that was already clean. Then she opened her laptop. Then she closed it. At 11:43, she finally sat down. The wooden box was small enough to fit in both hands. It had a brass clasp. No lock. No trick. Just a box. Nora opened it. Inside was a photograph, a receipt, a silver key, and 3 folded pieces of paper. The photograph showed her mother when she was young, maybe 35. Nora had never seen this picture. Her mother stood outside the Juniper Café. Beside her were Emily and Michael. The 3 of them were laughing. Nora turned the photograph over. August 14th, 2015. She looked at the receipt. It was from the Juniper. 3 coffees. 1 blueberry muffin. 2 pieces of toast. Date: August 14th, 2015. Time: 6:42 p.m. Nora unfolded the first piece of paper. It was her mother's handwriting. Nora, if you're reading this, then I wasn't able to tell you myself. Nora stopped. She almost put it down. Instead, she continued. There are things I kept from you because I believed they belonged to other people. Emily's story was one of them. But if you're here now, perhaps it has become part of yours. Nora stared at the page. Her mother's handwriting suddenly looked unfamiliar. You will probably be angry with me. That's okay. You should be. Nora let out a quiet laugh that sounded nothing like laughter. Then she read the next line. The key opens a drawer at the Juniper. Nora looked at the silver key. The drawer contains letters. Please don't read them all at once. She frowned. Some things should be learned slowly. At the bottom was one final sentence. And Nora, whatever you discover, don't assume that leaving is always the same thing as letting go. Nora sat there for a long time. Her mother had died 7 months earlier. 7 months. And somehow she was still finding new versions of her. Nora put the letter down. She picked up the key. There was a number engraved on it. 17. The Juniper had 17 tables. She knew because she had counted them when she first started working there. But only one table had a drawer. Table 17. It was in the back corner, beside the old bookshelf. Nora had never used it. She returned to the cafe after lunch. Daniel was there. Of course he was. He looked at the key. Where did you get that? My mother. His face changed. Nora walked past him. Don't. He stood. Don't what? Tell me I shouldn't. Daniel sighed. Fair. Table 17 had a narrow wooden drawer. Nora inserted the key. It clicked. Inside were envelopes. Dozens of them. Some yellow. Some white. Some blue. Each had a name written on it. Nora recognized a few. Hannah. Mr. Alvarez. Evelyn. Daniel. And then she saw one that made her stop. Michael Reed. Nora stared. Daniel stood behind her. That's my brother's name. Nora turned slowly. Your brother. Daniel looked at the envelope. For the first time since she'd met him, Nora saw something close to panic in his eyes. Michael Reed was your brother. Daniel nodded. Nora looked down again. There were 2 envelopes. One addressed to Michael. One addressed to Emily. Both were unopened. And beneath them was a 3rd envelope. Nora's hands went cold. It had been written in her mother's handwriting. The name on it was Daniel Reed. Chapter 5. The Rule of the Letters. Daniel didn't touch the envelope. Neither did Nora. They stood beside table 17 while the cafe continued around them. A woman laughed near the counter. Someone opened the front door. The bell rang. A coffee grinder started. Normal life continued. But Nora felt as though the entire room had shifted. "Why does my mother have a letter for you?" Daniel asked. "I don't know. Did you know about this?" "No." "Did Evelyn?" "I don't know." Daniel rubbed his forehead. Nora pulled the envelope free. Daniel reached for it. "Wait." She stopped. He stared at his name. Then he said, "There's a rule." "What rule?" "The letters." Nora looked at him. "There's a rule about letters?" Daniel nodded. "My sister told me about it." "Emily?" "Yeah." "What did she say?" "She said people left letters here when they didn't know how to say something." Nora looked at the drawer. "To whom?" "Sometimes themselves." She waited. "Sometimes someone else." "And the cafe kept them?" "Apparently." "Why?" Daniel shrugged. "Because people trusted the cafe." Nora looked around. It was ridiculous, and yet somehow it made sense. People confessed things in places where they felt anonymous. A cafe could become a temporary home. A table could become a witness. Maybe that was all the Juniper really was. A place where people said things they couldn't say anywhere else. "What's the rule?" Nora asked. Daniel pointed toward the envelope. "You don't open a letter unless the person who wrote it tells you to." Nora laughed. "That's it. That's it. That's not a rule. That's basic decency. My sister took it seriously." Nora looked at the envelopes. "Did she leave one for you?" Daniel nodded. "Where is it?" "I don't know." "You never found it?" "No." "Maybe it's here." Daniel's expression darkened. "Maybe." Nora looked at him. "Do you want to find it?" Daniel didn't answer. That was answer enough. They searched the drawer. Nothing. They checked the old shelves. Nothing. Then Nora noticed something. A small handwritten number on the back of Emily's envelope. 7. She looked at table 7. Daniel followed her gaze. "No." "What?" "Don't." Nora walked over. Daniel followed. The underside of table 7 had a tiny metal plate screwed into the wood. 7. Nothing else. But underneath the table, taped to the frame, was a small envelope. Daniel crouched. His hands stopped. Nora knew immediately. "Is that hers?" He nodded. The envelope was old. The edges were worn. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Daniel." He didn't pick it up. Nora crouched beside him. "You don't have to open it." "I know." "You don't have to do this today." "I know." Daniel stared at the envelope. Then he whispered, "She died 8 years ago." Nora said nothing. "I've spent 8 years wondering if there was something I missed." His voice cracked. Just slightly. Enough. Nora reached toward the envelope. Daniel stopped her. "No." She pulled her hand back. He picked it up himself. For a moment he simply held it. Then he looked at Nora. "Will you stay?" Nora nodded. Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He read it silently. His face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. His shoulders dropped. His eyes closed. Nora looked away. She gave him privacy. After almost a minute, Daniel folded the paper. "What did she say?" Daniel swallowed. "She said she wasn't afraid of dying." Nora looked at him. That's all. No. He looked toward the window. She said she was afraid I would spend my whole life waiting for people who had already left. Nora felt something tighten in her chest. Daniel laughed quietly. Sounds like her. Then he turned to Nora. She also wrote something about your mother. Nora went still. What? Daniel hesitated. She said Sarah knew why Michael left. Chapter 6. What happened to Michael? Nora couldn't sleep that night. At 2 in the morning, she went downstairs. Her mother's old house still had boxes stacked against the hallway walls. Nora had stopped unpacking after the first month. Some rooms looked lived in. Others looked abandoned. She sat on the kitchen floor and opened an old storage box. Inside were receipts, photographs, Christmas cards, a broken watch, a gardening magazine from 2017. Nothing. Then she found a small notebook. Her mother's handwriting filled the first few pages. Shopping lists, appointments, reminders. Then, near the middle, a name appeared. Michael. Nora froze. She turned the page. Talked to Michael today. Next page. He won't tell Daniel. Next. He says leaving is the only way. Nora's breathing changed. She kept reading. I told him Emily deserves the truth. The next page was blank. Then another. He asked me to promise something. Nora stared. I promised. There were no more notes. Nora closed the notebook. The next morning, she went to the library. Daniel was working behind the front desk. He looked surprised to see her. You look terrible. Thanks. Bad night. Your brother ruined it. Daniel stopped. Nora placed the notebook on the desk. He stared at it. Where did you find that? My mother's house. Daniel picked it up. He flipped through the pages. Then stopped. She knew. Apparently. Knew what? That Michael left because of Emily. Daniel looked at her. That doesn't make sense. I know. Michael loved her. Did he? Daniel frowned. Yes. Then why leave? I don't know. Did he say anything before he disappeared? No. Did Emily know? Daniel's expression changed. She knew something. What? She stopped talking about him. Nora stared. That's it. Emily wasn't the kind of person who talked when she was hurt. Nora thought of her mother. Then herself. Maybe some families passed down more than eye color. Daniel closed the notebook. There was something else. What? After Michael left, Emily started coming to the Juniper alone. How often? Every night. Why? She said she was waiting. For Michael. Daniel nodded. Did he ever come back? Not that I know. Nora sat down. What if he did? Daniel looked at her. What? What if he came back and nobody knew? Daniel laughed. That's impossible. Why? Because I would have known. Would you? Silence. Nora took out her mother's letter. She unfolded it. She told me not to assume leaving is the same thing as letting go. Daniel stared at the words. Then he looked toward the library windows. I hate that sentence. Why? Because my mother used to say it. Nora's eyes widened. Your mother? Yeah. She knew my mother. Apparently. Daniel sat down opposite her. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Daniel said, There's something I've never told anyone. Nora waited. Michael called me 3 days before he left. And he said he was going to California. Nora frowned. That's not exactly mysterious. I know. Did he say why? Daniel shook his head. He just said he needed to disappear. Did he mention Emily? No. What about your mother? No. Then what? Daniel looked at Nora. He asked me if I thought people could love each other and still ruin each other's lives. Nora didn't respond. Daniel continued. I told him no. Why? Because I was 25 and stupid. Nora smiled faintly. What would you say now? Daniel thought about it. Yes. Outside, a bus moved down the street. A woman crossed the road holding a paper cup. The town looked ordinary. Nora looked at Daniel. Then maybe we need to find out what happened. Daniel shook his head. Maybe we don't. Why? Because sometimes people leave for a reason. That's true. And sometimes the truth doesn't fix anything. Nora looked at him. Maybe. She picked up the notebook. But I think my mother kept this for a reason. Daniel looked at her. What's your plan? Nora smiled. I don't have one. That's comforting. I'm going to start with the cafe. Of course. Nora stood. Daniel followed. Wait. She turned. He hesitated. Then he said, I'll help. Nora smiled. Good. Neither of them noticed Evelyn standing outside the library window, watching them, and holding an old photograph of three people who had once believed love would be enough. Chapter 7. The photograph in the window. The photograph had been taken in winter. Nora knew that immediately. There was snow behind the three people. Emily stood on the left. Michael stood beside her. And Sarah, Nora's mother, stood on the right. But this wasn't the photograph from the cafe. In this one, Emily wasn't smiling. Neither was Michael. Sarah was. Almost nervously. On the back were three words. Before everything changed. Evelyn placed the photograph on the cafe counter. Where did you get that? Nora asked. Your mother gave it to me. When? 3 years ago. Nora stared. Why? She wanted me to keep it. Why? Evelyn looked at Daniel. Because she didn't trust herself. Daniel frowned. Trust herself with what? Evelyn ignored him. Nora took the photograph. What happened that night? Evelyn sighed. You children always want the whole story at once. We're not children. That's exactly what children say. Daniel smiled. Evelyn pointed toward table 7. Sit. They did. Evelyn joined them. For a while, she simply watched people pass outside. Then she began. Emily and Michael were very much in love. Daniel nodded. I know. No, Evelyn said. You know what they looked like from the outside. Daniel's smile disappeared. They were young. They were serious. They had plans. She looked at Nora. Your mother was the person Emily trusted most. Why? Because Sarah had already lost someone. My father. Evelyn nodded. Your father left before you were born. Nora stiffened. She knew that. At least, she thought she did. Her mother had always said he wasn't ready to be a father. She'd never said more. Evelyn continued. Sarah understood what it felt like when someone decided to leave without giving you a choice. Nora looked down. So she tried to protect Emily. Yes. From Michael. Evelyn shook her head. From herself. Nora didn't understand. Evelyn looked at Daniel. Emily was sick. Daniel froze. What? Not seriously. Then what? She had a heart condition. Nora looked at Daniel. He was staring at Evelyn. Emily never told me. She didn't want anyone treating her differently. Daniel's jaw tightened. Michael knew. Eventually. Eventually. He found out shortly before the wedding. Daniel stood. That's why he left. Evelyn didn't answer. Nora did. Why would he leave because she was sick? Evelyn looked at her. Because he was afraid. Of what? Losing her. Daniel shook his head. That's ridiculous. No, Evelyn said softly. It's human. Daniel walked toward the window. Nora watched him. Evelyn continued. Michael had watched his own father die young. He couldn't bear the thought of building a life around someone he might lose. So he abandoned her. Evelyn looked down. He thought he was saving them both. Nora shook her head. That's not saving. No. That's running. Yes. Daniel turned. Did Emily know? Evelyn nodded. When? The night he left. Then why did she keep waiting? Evelyn's eyes moved toward table 7. Because Michael came back. Daniel stopped. What? Once. When? 2 days before Emily died. The cafe seemed to become completely silent. Nora stared. Why didn't anyone tell me? Evelyn looked at her. Because your mother promised him she wouldn't. Why? Michael didn't want Emily to know he'd returned. That makes no sense. It does if you know what he was planning. Nora leaned forward. What was he planning? Evelyn reached into her bag. She pulled out another envelope. Old. Yellow. The handwriting was familiar. She placed it on the table. Nora didn't touch it. Daniel stared at the name. Sarah Bennett. Evelyn whispered. Your mother kept Michael's final letter. Chapter 8. The letter Sarah never opened. The letter was dated 8 years ago, 3 weeks before Emily died. Nora knew that before opening it. The envelope had been sealed. Not opened and resealed. Sealed. Her mother had kept it that way. Daniel sat across from her. Evelyn had left. The cafe was closing. Nora held the letter. Should I open it? Daniel looked at her. No. She frowned. No. It's addressed to your mother. She's dead. I know. So. Daniel didn't answer. Nora looked at the envelope. Then she understood. He wasn't saying no because of the rule. He was saying no because he was afraid. Nora placed the letter on the table. You're right. Daniel looked surprised. She stood. We'll leave it. Thank you. Nora picked up the envelope. Then stopped. But tomorrow I'm finding Michael. Daniel stared. What? Your brother. He's probably dead. Probably isn't good enough. Nora. She turned. My mother spent years keeping this secret. Maybe because it wasn't hers to tell. Maybe. Nora looked at the letter. But if Michael is alive, he deserves to know what Emily knew. Daniel stared at her. Why are you doing this? Nora didn't have an answer. Not a good one. Maybe because her mother had left too many unfinished sentences. Maybe because Emily had died waiting. Maybe because Daniel's face looked different whenever he talked about his sister. Or maybe because Nora had spent 7 months pretending she didn't care about anyone leaving. She finally said, Because I don't like unfinished stories. Daniel smiled. That's not true. What? You love unfinished stories. Nora frowned. How would you know? Because you work in a cafe where everyone tells you theirs. That made her laugh. A real laugh. The first one in weeks. Daniel smiled too. For a few seconds, the mystery disappeared. There was just a cafe. A quiet night. 2 people standing beside table 7. Then Daniel said, I know someone who might know where Michael is. Nora's smile faded. Who? His old roommate. Name? Lucas. Where? Portland. Nora grabbed her coat. Daniel blinked. You're not serious. It's 2 hours. It's almost 9. Then we'll go tomorrow. We. Nora looked at him. You said you'd help. I didn't realize helping involved interstate travel. Portland isn't another state. Daniel stared. Nora smiled. See you at 7. She walked out. Daniel remained behind. He looked down at the letter, then toward table 7. For the first time in 8 years, he wondered if his sister's story might not have ended when she died. Maybe it had simply been waiting for someone to remember where it began. Chapter 9. The Drive to Portland. They left Bellwether at 7:18 the next morning. Daniel's car was a 10-year-old Subaru with a coffee stain permanently embedded in the center console. Nora noticed immediately. You're judging me. I'm judging the cup holder. It works. Technically. They drove north. The highway was quiet. September had arrived, and the trees were beginning to turn. Not fully. Just enough that the edges of the forest looked slightly different. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel. Nora watched the road. After 40 minutes, she said, Why didn't you tell me about Michael? Daniel looked over. Because I barely tell anyone about Michael. Why? Because people ask what happened. And you don't know. I know some things. Like, Daniel thought. Michael loved Emily. Nora waited. Michael was afraid. She nodded. And he left. Yes. That's not enough. I know. They drove another 20 minutes. Then Nora asked, Do you think he regrets it? Daniel's grip tightened slightly. I don't know. Do you? Daniel glanced at her. Regret what? Leaving. Daniel looked back at the road. Everyone regrets something. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Nora smiled. You're frustrating. So I've been told. At a gas station, they stopped for coffee. Nora came back with 2 cups. Daniel looked at his. You got me cream. You always get black coffee. I know. So, you remembered. Nora shrugged. I work in a cafe. Daniel smiled. They continued. When they reached Portland, they found Lucas's address in an old phone number saved in Daniel's contacts. The apartment building was small. 3 floors. Brick. A bicycle chained near the entrance. Lucas opened the door wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. He stared at Daniel. Then he said, You're late. Daniel froze. Nora looked at him. Late for what? Lucas looked at her. Then back at Daniel. You never told her? Daniel swallowed. Lucas. Lucas stepped aside. Come in. Nora entered. The apartment smelled like coffee and old books. Lucas shut the door. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Lucas said, Michael told me you'd eventually come. Daniel's face changed. When? Years ago. How many? 7. Nora sat down. Where is he? Lucas looked at her. That's complicated. Everything is complicated. Lucas smiled. You sound like Sarah. Nora froze. Daniel looked at Lucas. You knew Sarah? Lucas nodded. She came to see me. When? After Emily died. Nora stood. What did she say? Lucas looked at Daniel. Then at Nora. She asked me to keep a promise. Nora whispered. What promise? Lucas walked to a bookshelf. He removed a small box and placed it on the table. The box looked exactly like the one Nora's mother had left her, except this one was older, and on its lid were 3 words. For Michael, someday. Chapter 10. The Truth About the Wedding. Lucas didn't open the box. Instead, he made coffee. Nora almost laughed. Apparently, everyone connected to this story believed coffee was the appropriate response to emotional devastation. Lucas sat down. Michael left because he thought Emily would eventually hate him. Daniel frowned. Why? Because he made a decision. What decision? Lucas looked at Nora. He planned to marry her anyway. Daniel went silent. Nora frowned. Then why did he leave? Because Emily told him she didn't want him to. What? Lucas nodded. After he learned about her heart condition, he wanted to cancel everything. Daniel shook his head. That's not what happened. Michael wanted to cancel the wedding. Emily refused. Why? Because she knew why he was doing it. Nora understood. He was afraid. Yes. Lucas continued. Emily told him that if he stayed because he felt sorry for her, she would never forgive him. Daniel looked down. So he left. Yes. That doesn't make sense. It made sense to Michael. Did Emily know he was leaving? Yes. Then why didn't she stop him? Lucas looked at Daniel. Because she loved him. The room went quiet. Nora looked toward the box. What happened afterward? Michael went to California. Did he ever contact Emily? Lucas shook his head. Not directly. What does that mean? He wrote letters. Daniel looked up. Letters. Dozens. Where are they? Lucas pointed toward the box. Nora's heart sank. Those are his. Lucas nodded. Michael sent them to Sarah. Why? Because he couldn't bring himself to send them to Emily. Daniel stared at the box. Did my sister know? Lucas shook his head. Sarah kept them. Nora remembered her mother's words. Please don't read them all at once. Her mother knew. She had known everything. And she had chosen silence. Why? Nora whispered. Lucas looked at her. Because Michael asked her to. Nora closed her eyes. Daniel stood. My brother left my sister and wrote letters for years. Yes. And Sarah kept them. Yes. Why didn't anyone tell me? Lucas said quietly. Because Emily asked Sarah not to. Daniel turned. What? Lucas nodded. Emily knew about the letters. Nora looked at him. How? She found out. When? About a month before she died. Daniel stared. Then why? Lucas's voice softened. Emily didn't want Michael to come back. Nora felt a chill. Why not? Because she knew she was getting worse. Daniel's face went pale. Lucas continued. She didn't want him to spend his life remembering her as someone he lost. Nora whispered. She wanted him to move on. Yes. Daniel sat down. For the first time, Nora saw him cry. Not loudly. Not dramatically. He simply lowered his head, and tears slipped down his face. Nora sat beside him. She didn't touch him. She knew some grief didn't want to be fixed. It only wanted company. After a while, Daniel whispered, "Where is Michael now?" Lucas looked at the box. Vermont. Nora looked up. Vermont. He owns a little repair shop. Does he know Emily died? Lucas stared at her. Of course. Daniel looked confused. Then why didn't he come back? Lucas didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, "Because he did." Nora's breath caught. When? Lucas looked toward Daniel. The day before Emily died. Chapter 11. The day before. Michael had returned to Bellwether on a rainy Thursday. He parked 2 blocks from the Juniper. He didn't go inside. Instead, he stood across the street and watched Emily through the cafe window. She was sitting at table 7, alone, reading, exactly as she had done hundreds of times before. Michael stayed there for 40 minutes. Then he left. Nora couldn't understand it. Why wouldn't he go inside? Lucas shrugged. Fear. That's insane. Love often is. Daniel stared at the floor. Did Emily see him? No. How do you know? Because Michael told me. Nora looked at Lucas. You spoke to him afterward? Yes. What did he say? He said she looked happy. Daniel laughed bitterly. She was dying. Lucas looked at him. She was still living. That silenced him. Nora thought about that sentence. Maybe that was what the entire story had been about. Not dying. Not leaving. Living with the knowledge that things end. What happened the next day? Nora asked. Lucas looked at Daniel. Emily collapsed. Daniel closed his eyes. At the cafe? Lucas nodded. Sarah was there. Nora froze. My mother. Yes. Was she with Emily? She arrived shortly before. Why? Emily asked her to come. Why? Lucas hesitated. To talk about Michael. Nora stared. So my mother knew Emily was going to die? No. Lucas's voice became gentle. Nobody knew. Then what happened? Emily told Sarah she wanted Michael to stay away. Nora looked at Daniel. Why? Because she believed he had a life ahead of him. Daniel's eyes filled again. Nora continued. What did my mother promise? Lucas looked toward the window. She promised Emily she wouldn't tell Michael that Emily had asked about him. Daniel stood. Wait. Nora turned. Daniel looked furious. She knew he was there. Lucas nodded. Across the street. She knew. Yes. Daniel laughed. That's cruel. No. Lucas shook his head. It was mercy. Daniel looked at him. Don't call it that. Lucas didn't argue. Nora looked at the box. What's inside? Letters. How many? 23. 23. Lucas nodded. Michael wrote them over 7 years. Nora whispered. 23 letters to a woman who was already dead. Lucas looked at her. That's the part you need to understand. What? Michael wasn't writing to Emily. Nora frowned. Then who? Lucas smiled sadly. Michael was writing to the version of himself that never got to say goodbye. Chapter 12. The 23 Letters. They returned to Bellwether the following afternoon. The box remained unopened. Daniel carried it. Nora carried her mother's notebook. Neither spoke much on the drive home. By sunset, they were back at the Juniper. Evelyn was waiting. She looked at the box. Then at Daniel. So. Daniel placed it on the counter. You knew. Evelyn sighed. Yes. You knew Michael was alive. Yes. You knew about the letters. Yes. Daniel looked angry. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't my story. Neither was it Sarah's. Evelyn looked at Nora. No. Nora stepped forward. But it became mine. Evelyn's expression softened. Yes. Nora placed the notebook beside the box. My mother kept secrets. She did. Why? Because she thought she was protecting people. Was she? Evelyn looked toward table 7. Sometimes. Sometimes. Protection and control can look very similar from the outside. Nora absorbed that. Daniel opened the box. 23 envelopes, each dated. The last one was dated 3 months ago. Nora stared. He's still writing. Daniel nodded. He picked up the newest letter. His hand trembled. Nora didn't ask him to open it. Instead, she said, "Maybe you should meet him." Daniel looked at her. "What? Michael? I don't know." "Neither did he." "Neither did who?" Nora smiled. "Anyone." Daniel looked at the letter. Then at table 7. "Why are you so determined to fix this?" Nora's expression changed. "I'm not." "Then what?" She looked at the old photographs on the wall. "I think I spent most of my life believing that if someone leaves, the story is over." Daniel said nothing. "My father left before I was born." Daniel looked at her. Nora continued. "My mother never talked about him, so I assumed that was the end." She took a breath. "Then my mother died, and I realized I had spent years being angry at someone I barely remembered." Daniel listened. "And now I find out that she had her own unfinished story." Nora looked at him. "Maybe everyone does." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's depressing." "Maybe." She sat down. "But it's also comforting." "How?" "Because maybe we're not broken." Daniel sat across from her. "Maybe we're just unfinished." For a long moment, they looked at each other. Something shifted. Small. Quiet. Neither acknowledged it. Then the cafe bell rang. They turned. Nobody was there. The door had opened by itself. Cold evening air moved through the room. And from somewhere near the back, a piece of paper slid off a shelf. Nora walked over. She picked it up. It was another yellow card. Same handwriting. "Some people come back when you're finally ready to stop waiting." Nora stared at it. Daniel read over her shoulder. "Who keeps doing this?" Nora looked around the empty cafe. "I have no idea." From behind them came Evelyn's voice. "I do." They turned. She was smiling. The cafe. Chapter 13. The cafe doesn't remember. Nora stared at Evelyn. "What does that mean?" Evelyn walked toward them. "The cafe doesn't remember." Daniel frowned. "Then who does?" "People." Evelyn touched the edge of table 7. "People remember things they thought they'd forgotten." Nora looked at the walls. All those photographs. All those names. All those years. "You've been doing this." Evelyn smiled. "Doing what?" "Leaving notes." "No." Daniel frowned. "Then who?" Evelyn shook her head. "Sometimes the person who needs to find something leaves it for themselves." Nora didn't understand. Evelyn continued. "Your mother left the first note." Nora froze. "She did. Years ago." "Why?" "She was afraid she'd forget what mattered." Nora stared at the yellow cards. "Did she write all of them?" "No." "Then who did?" Evelyn smiled. "People who came before you." Nora looked at Daniel. "What?" Evelyn explained. "Years ago, the owner started a tradition. If someone had something they couldn't say, they could write it down and leave it somewhere in the cafe." "Like a confession?" "Sometimes." "A letter?" "Sometimes." "A goodbye?" "Often." Nora touched the old clock. "And nobody opened them?" "Not unless they were addressed to them." Daniel looked at the envelopes. "So the cafe became a place for unfinished things." "Exactly." Nora smiled. "That's not supernatural." "No." Evelyn smiled back. "It's better." Daniel laughed quietly. Nora looked at the clock. So who wrote today's note? Evelyn pointed at Daniel. He frowned. Me. She nodded. Daniel looked confused. I didn't. Evelyn reached into his coat pocket. Daniel froze. She pulled out a folded yellow card. Nora's eyes widened. Daniel stared. I didn't put that there. Evelyn handed it to him. He unfolded it. The handwriting was his. Nora looked at him. What does it say? Daniel didn't answer. Daniel. He handed it to her. Call Michael. Nora stared. Then she looked at him. Do you have his number? Daniel shook his head. Lucas had given it to them. Daniel had saved it. But he hadn't called. Nora held out her phone. Call. Daniel stared at her. What if he doesn't answer? Then you tried. What if he does? Nora smiled. Then you stop waiting. Daniel took the phone. He entered the number. Pressed call. 1 ring. 2, 3. Then a man's voice answered. Hello. Daniel stopped breathing. Nora heard it through the speaker. Michael. 8 years older. Older than the photographs. But alive. Daniel closed his eyes. Michael. Silence. Then. Daniel. Nora watched her friend's face. Michael's voice changed. Oh God. Daniel swallowed. Where are you? Why? Because I need to see you. Another silence. Then Michael asked, Does Emily know? Daniel looked at Nora. Nora understood immediately. She took the phone. No, she said. Michael went quiet. Nora continued. But I think she would want you to stop waiting. And for the first time in 8 years, Michael began to cry. Chapter 14. The Man in Vermont. Michael agreed to meet them the following Saturday. Not in Bellwether. Not at the Juniper. He asked them to come to Vermont. Nora drove this time. Daniel sat beside her. He didn't say much. Neither did Nora. The road was beautiful. Green hills. Old barns. Small towns. Farmhouses with mailboxes leaning toward the road. By late afternoon, they reached a small town near the Vermont border. Michael's repair shop sat behind a white house. The sign read, Reed Repair and Restoration. Nothing about it suggested mystery. There were 2 old trucks outside. A bicycle. A wooden chair. A dog sleeping under the porch. Michael came outside. Nora recognized him immediately. Not because of the photographs. Because he had Daniel's eyes. He was 52. Gray threaded through his dark hair. His hands were rough. He looked like someone who worked with them. He looked ordinary. That somehow made everything more painful. Daniel stepped out of the car. Michael stopped. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Michael said, You're tall. Daniel laughed. That's what you came up with? Michael smiled. I had 8 years to prepare. Daniel shook his head. They hugged. Nora looked away. She gave them privacy. After a minute, Daniel stepped back. This is Nora. Michael looked at her. Nora held out her hand. Michael didn't shake it. Instead, he said, Sarah's daughter. Nora's heart stopped. You knew. Your mother sent me a photograph. When? After Emily died. Nora didn't know what to say. Michael looked toward the house. Come inside. They sat around a kitchen table. There were no dramatic revelations. No hidden rooms. No secret documents. Just coffee. Again. Michael made it himself. Nora almost smiled. Did my mother tell you about the letters? Michael nodded. Did you know she kept them? Yes. Why didn't you ask for them? Michael looked at Daniel. Because I was ashamed. Daniel frowned. Of what? Everything. Michael looked down. I loved Emily. Daniel nodded. I know. I left her. I know. I thought I was protecting her. Daniel's jaw tightened. You weren't. Michael nodded. I know. The honesty stopped Daniel. Michael continued. I was afraid that if I married her, every day would become a countdown. Nora looked at him. And Emily knew. She knew me. He smiled sadly. Better than I knew myself. Michael told them about the last conversation. Emily had said, If you're going to stay, stay because you want tomorrow. Michael had asked, What if tomorrow isn't promised? She'd answered, It isn't promised to anyone. He had left, and spent the next 8 years regretting it. Why didn't you come back? Daniel asked. Michael looked at him. Because I believed I had lost the right. Daniel stared. Who gave you that idea? Michael didn't answer. Nora knew. Emily. Sarah. Michael himself. Sometimes guilt didn't need permission. It simply built a house inside you and moved in. Michael looked at Nora. Your mother wanted me to come back. Nora froze. What? After Emily died? Then why didn't you? Michael looked down. Because Sarah told me Emily's last request. What was it? Michael swallowed. She wanted me to live. Nora's eyes filled. Michael continued. Not remember her every day. He looked toward the window. Live. Daniel whispered. And you did. Michael smiled sadly. I tried. Nora looked around. The repair shop. The house. The ordinary life. You married. Michael shook his head. No. Why? He looked at Daniel. Because I never figured out how to explain Emily. Daniel looked down. Michael added, Maybe that isn't fair to anyone. Nora said quietly, No. Michael looked at her. Your mother understood that. Nora smiled. She understood too much. Michael laughed. She did. Then he stood. I have something for you. He left the room. When he returned, he held a small envelope. He handed it to Nora. Her name was written across the front. Not her mother's. Hers. Nora. She stared. What's this? Michael smiled. Something Sarah asked me to give you if you ever found me. Nora's hands trembled. She opened it. Inside was one sentence. Some love stories aren't meant to be lived. Some are meant to teach you how to recognize the one that is. Nora looked up. Michael was watching her. Daniel was too. And suddenly Nora realized that the Juniper hadn't brought her to Vermont to find Michael. It had brought her here to find something else. Something she hadn't been looking for. Chapter 15. The First Snow. Winter arrived early in Bellwether. The first snow came in November. Nora was working the morning shift when the flakes began falling. She stood behind the counter and watched the street disappear beneath white. Daniel came in at 7:12. Of course. He shook snow from his coat. Nora placed his coffee on the counter. You're predictable. You're late. It's 7:12. Exactly. Nora smiled. Daniel sat at table 7. Things had changed since Vermont. Not dramatically. Neither had confessed anything. Neither had said the words. But Daniel stayed longer now. Sometimes they talked after closing. Sometimes he brought books from the library. Sometimes Nora found herself looking toward the door at 7:05. She hated that. She liked it too. That morning, Daniel pulled a folded paper from his coat. What is that? Nothing. Nora narrowed her eyes. "You're bad at lying. So are you." He placed the paper on the table. Nora opened it. It was a photograph. She looked at it. The Juniper. Summer. A group of people outside. Her mother was there. Evelyn. Emily. Michael. And a younger Daniel. Nora smiled. "Where did you get this?" "Michael." Nora looked closer. There was something written on the back. She turned it over. The beginning is usually hiding in plain sight. Nora stared. Daniel said, "There's something else." "What?" "Michael wants to visit." Nora looked at him. "Here?" "Yes." "When?" "Tomorrow." Nora smiled. "Good." Daniel watched her. "What?" "Nothing." "What?" "You're happy." Nora looked away. "About Michael." "Sure." Daniel smiled. Nora pointed at him. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Do that." "Do what?" "Look at me like that." Daniel's smile faded slightly. "Like what?" Nora didn't answer. The cafe was nearly empty. Snow fell outside. The old clock ticked. Daniel looked at her. "Nora." She swallowed. "What?" "Are you happy?" The question was simple. It shouldn't have frightened her. But it did. She thought about her mother, her father, Emily, Michael, all those people who had loved and lost and waited. Then she looked at Daniel. "Sometimes." He nodded. "Me too." Nora smiled. "That's probably enough." Daniel looked toward the window. "Maybe." And for some reason, that felt better than saying anything bigger. That evening, after closing, Nora found another card beneath the cash register. She knew the handwriting. Her mother's. "Don't rush this one." Nora laughed. "Mom." Daniel looked over. "What?" She held up the card. He read it. Then he laughed too. "Your mother has opinions." "Apparently." Nora put the card in her pocket. Then she locked the cafe door. They walked home through the snow. Not together. Not exactly. Their houses were in the same direction. So they walked side by side. Their shoulders occasionally touched. Neither moved away. Chapter 16. The Love Story Nobody Told. Michael returned to Bellwether in December. He entered the Juniper at 10:05 on a Sunday morning. The bell rang. Nora looked up. He stood in the doorway. Older. Nervous. Alive. Daniel was already there. He stood. Michael smiled. "Still table 7?" Daniel nodded. "Still table 7." Michael sat. Nora made coffee. For the first time, the three of them were together in the cafe. Emily wasn't there. Sarah wasn't there. But somehow they were. In every photograph, every chair, every memory. Michael looked around. "I forgot how small this place was." Nora smiled. "People always say that. Because it feels bigger in your memory." Nora looked at him. Michael smiled. "That's the problem with memory." They talked for hours. About ordinary things. Michael's business. Daniel's work. Nora's plans. Books. Weather. The cafe. Eventually Michael told them something neither expected. He had been coming back to Bellwether every year. For 8 years. He'd never entered the Juniper. He'd stand across the street. Then leave. Nora asked why. Michael looked at table 7. "Because that's where Emily sat when I saw her for the last time." Daniel frowned. "You could have come in." "I know," Nora said quietly. "Maybe you thought coming inside would mean accepting that she was gone." Michael looked at her. "Yes." Nora nodded. She understood. Because after her mother died, she'd avoided her mother's bedroom for 6 months. Not because she couldn't enter, because entering would make the absence real. Michael reached into his coat. He pulled out a letter. Not old. New. He placed it on the table. I wrote this last night. Daniel looked at him. To Emily. Michael smiled. No. He pushed it toward Nora. To Sarah. Nora froze. Why me? Because she wanted you to have it. Nora opened it. Michael's handwriting was careful. The letter was short. He thanked Sarah for keeping the letters, for protecting Emily, for telling him to live, for believing that love could survive even when people couldn't. At the bottom, he wrote, "You were right about one thing, Sarah. Leaving isn't always letting go." Nora stopped. Michael continued, "Sometimes staying isn't either." She looked up. Michael was crying. Nora closed the letter. Then she did something she'd never expected. She hugged him. He held her tightly. For a few seconds, she was not Sarah's daughter. She was simply someone holding another person who had carried grief for too long. Daniel looked away. When Nora released Michael, he smiled. "Your mother would have liked you." Nora laughed through her tears. "She usually did." Michael smiled. "Good." He stood. "I'm going to walk." Daniel stood too. "Want company?" Michael shook his head. "No." He looked toward table 7. "Some things I need to do alone." Daniel nodded. Michael left. The bell rang. Nora watched him disappear down Willow Street. Daniel returned to the table. He looked at her. "How are you?" Nora thought about it, then smiled. "Better." Daniel nodded. "Me too." She looked at him. "Daniel." "Yeah." "Do you ever think this cafe actually remembers?" Daniel smiled. "No. Not even a little. No." Nora laughed. "Why?" "Because cafes don't remember." He looked around. "People do." Nora looked toward the old photographs. Maybe that was true. Maybe the Juniper had never remembered anything. Maybe people had simply needed somewhere to leave their memories. A safe place. A quiet place. A place where love stories could sit unfinished without being forgotten. Nora looked at Daniel. And suddenly she wondered what story they were writing. Chapter 17. Table 7. Spring came slowly. Snow disappeared from the sidewalks. The bookstore put plants outside. The laundromat's windows were cleaned. The Juniper changed its menu. And table 7 remained exactly where it had always been. Daniel still sat there. Nora still worked behind the counter. Their relationship remained frustratingly undefined. Until one Thursday evening. The cafe was empty. Nora was wiping tables. Daniel was reading. She looked at him. "Do you know what I hate?" Daniel didn't look up. "Many things." "You're funny." "Thank you." Table 7. That got his attention. "What about it?" "Everyone has a story attached to it." "That's why you hate it." "No." Nora placed the cloth down. "I hate that every time I look at it, I think about people leaving." Daniel closed his book. "Nora, I'm serious." "I know." She sat opposite him. "Emily lost Michael." "Yes." "My mother lost my father." "Yes." "Sarah lost Emily." "Yes." "Michael lost Emily." "Yes." And everyone spent years thinking about what could have been different. Daniel watched her. "What are you trying to say?" Nora took a breath. "I'm trying to say I don't want to spend my life sitting at table 7. Daniel looked at her. "Neither do I." She smiled. "Good." He stood. Nora frowned. "What are you doing?" Daniel walked to the other side of the cafe. He moved 2 chairs together. Then he looked at her. "Come here." Nora stared. "What?" "Table 3. She laughed. "Why?" "Because it's ours now." Nora walked over. They sat. It felt ridiculous. And wonderful. Daniel looked at her. "I've wanted to ask you something for months." Nora's heart began beating faster. "What?" "Would you have dinner with me?" She stared. "That's it." Daniel smiled. "I'm trying to be realistic." Nora laughed. "You're terrible at romance." "I know." "Where?" "I don't know." "When?" "Tonight." Nora shook her head. "You're really bad at this." Daniel looked worried. "Is that a no?" Nora smiled. "No." Daniel relaxed. "Okay." Nora leaned closer. "Daniel." "Yeah." "You're aware this is technically our first date." He smiled. "I know." "Then don't take me somewhere with bad coffee." "That's unreasonable." "Daniel." "Fine." She smiled. He smiled back. And for once, there was no mystery. No missing person. No old letter. No secret. Just 2 people sitting at a table in a small cafe in Massachusetts. And that was enough. Chapter 18. The Last Letter. Nora found the final letter in June. It was hidden behind the old clock. The same place where she'd found the first card. She almost laughed. The envelope was white. Her mother's handwriting was on the front. Nora. She took it home. She waited until evening. Then she opened it. There were only a few paragraphs. Her mother apologized. Not for everything. Just for the things that mattered. She admitted that she had spent too much of her life believing she could protect people by deciding what they were allowed to know. She admitted she had done the same thing with Nora. "I thought if I didn't tell you about your father, you wouldn't miss him." Nora stopped. Her eyes filled. "I was wrong." She continued. "People miss what they never had." Nora closed her eyes. Her mother wrote about Emily. About Michael. About the letters. About the juniper. And then she wrote, "You may wonder why I brought you back here." Nora stared at the page. "I didn't." She frowned. "You came back because some part of you was ready." Nora laughed softly. That sounded like her mother. "The cafe doesn't know you. It doesn't remember you. It cannot bring people back. But perhaps it can remind you that people leave pieces of themselves everywhere." Nora wiped her eyes. "In photographs. In old songs. In the chair they always sat in. In the coffee they ordered. In the stories other people tell about them. Then, don't confuse remembering with waiting." Nora stopped. She read the sentence again. Remembering is looking back with love. Waiting is refusing to look forward. She folded the letter. Then she noticed something at the bottom. One final line. "And Nora, if Daniel is still sitting at table 7, tell him to move." She laughed so hard she cried. The next morning, she walked into the cafe. Daniel was there. Table 7. Of course. Nora placed the letter in front of him. He read the last sentence. His face turned red. "Your mother was terrifying. She liked you." "That's worse." Nora smiled. Daniel stood. "Where are we going?" She pointed toward table 3. "Somewhere new." He followed. They sat. Outside, summer sunlight filled Willow Street. The cafe was busy. People came and went. Someone proposed near the window. A couple argued quietly over pancakes. A father gave his daughter a birthday card. An old woman sat alone and read a book. Life continued. Stories continued. And somewhere behind the clock, another blank card waited. Chapter 19. The Cafe That Remembered Every Love Story. Years later, people still told stories about the Juniper Café. Some were true. Some were exaggerated. Some were probably completely invented. There was the couple who met there and eventually bought a house together. The man who proposed by the window. The woman who came every Thursday after her divorce and eventually stopped coming because she met someone else. The two high school sweethearts who returned 20 years after breaking up. The elderly couple who celebrated their 50th anniversary at Table 3. And there was Daniel Reed. He eventually became director of the Bellwether Public Library. Nora stayed at the Juniper. Not forever, but long enough. She eventually became a partner in the cafe. She and Daniel married on a rainy Saturday in October. They didn't have a huge wedding. There were 43 people. Evelyn was there. Michael was there. Lucas came from Portland. The ceremony took place in the little garden behind the cafe. Table 7 was moved outside. Nora insisted. Daniel complained. She ignored him. Years passed. The Juniper changed. The walls were painted. The chairs were replaced. The menu became slightly more expensive. The old coffee machine finally died. The bookstore next door changed owners. The laundromat became a bakery. But the brass bell above the door remained. So did the photographs. And the letters. Nora never opened any of them. She didn't need to. She understood the rule now. Some things belong to the people who wrote them. And some stories are better when you don't know every detail. One evening, years after her mother died, Nora sat alone at Table 7. She was older now. Her hair had begun to show silver. Daniel was at the library. The cafe was nearly empty. She looked at the photograph of Emily. Then Michael. Then her mother. She thought about all the people who had loved each other in that room. Some had stayed. Some had left. Some had come back. Some never did. And yet every story had mattered. Nora looked toward the old clock. A young woman entered the cafe. She was crying. Not loudly. Just enough for Nora to notice. The woman sat at Table 7. Nora walked over. Coffee. The woman nodded. Please. Nora brought it. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask who had hurt her. She didn't tell her everything would be okay. She simply sat down for a moment. The woman looked surprised. Do you work here? Nora smiled. Yes. Is it always this quiet? Not always. The woman looked around. I heard this place has stories. Nora smiled. Every place has stories. Do you know them all? Nora looked toward the wall. No. Why not? Because people deserve to keep some things for themselves. The woman nodded. She took a sip of coffee. After a while, she said, I think someone I love is leaving. Nora's heart softened. She knew that sentence. She had heard versions of it her entire life. She looked toward the empty chair across from the woman. Then she said, Maybe. The woman looked at her. Nora smiled. But that doesn't mean your story ends tonight. The woman lowered her eyes. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. The brass bell above the door moved gently in the draft. Nora stood. Before walking away, she noticed something beneath the table. A yellow card. She picked it up. There was writing on it. Not her mother's. Not Evelyn's. Not Emily's. Not Daniel's. It belonged to someone she didn't know. The message was simple. I hope someone remembers that I was here. Nora stared at it. Then she turned the card over. The back was blank. She took a pen from her pocket, and underneath the sentence she wrote, "Someone will." Then she placed the card back beneath the table, because that was what the Juniper had always been. Not a magical cafe. Not a place that could bring back the dead. Not a place that could repair broken hearts. It was simply a place where people could leave pieces of themselves behind. And sometimes, years later, someone else would find them, read them, remember them, and understand that they weren't alone. The cafe didn't remember every love story. People did. And perhaps that was better. Because cafes close. Buildings change. Tables get replaced. Photographs fade. But the stories we tell about the people we loved can keep going. Sometimes for years. Sometimes for generations. And sometimes they simply wait quietly for the right person to sit down. At the right table, on an ordinary evening, with a cup of coffee in front of them, and a little time left to listen. The end.